Yep. So we're going to start. So hello good people, thank you for coming to this talk about ethics in software, or more precisely ethical consequences of practicing software. My name is Boris Baldassari. I'm an independent consultant on software development methods and tools, and I work for Castalia Solutions. So this is not really a talk, this is rather the start of a discussion. What we will see today is first, why do we have to care about ethics in software? Why is it important? We'll view the personal and the community takes on ethics. What does that mean both as an individual and as a community? And we'll then see a couple of use cases to exercise our judgment and see that it's not always easy, black or white. And then we'll conclude. So first thing, why do ethics matter in software specifically? We'll start with a couple of definitions. Ethics, according to Wikipedia and dictionary, is the study of values and customs of a person or a group. In other words, it's all about understanding the difference between right and wrong and how to apply it. Or the philosophy, or in even simpler words, it's about how to act well. Well, it's quite an old discipline, of course, something like Greek, ancient Greek. And there have been, of course, several currents of thoughts on the subject. I'd like to mention a couple of them, which will help us, well, see the different perspectives that we can have on this. The first one is the consequentialism, which says that when you do something, only the consequences matter. So if the consequences are okay, then you're okay. The deontology is kind of the opposite way. If the intention you have when you do something are good, then whatever the consequences, you are good. Why not? And the last one I'd like to mention is the virtue, which says that if you're a good person, then you will do good. Well, we agree or not, but it gives some material to think about it. The second definition is about politics. And so according to the dictionary, once again, politics is the study of the relative distribution of power, authority, and privileges in human society. Well, of course, software changes that and has changed that a lot already. So what we can say is that technology is definitely not neutral. Software is definitely not neutral regarding this distribution of power, authority, and privileges. And the thing is that when we practice software, when we develop software, build software, deploy software, support our users, and so on, everything we do with software has, we have to make choices, mostly technological choices, but not only, because we have to support the community, choose the licensing, and so on. And every one of these choices has consequences. What I want to say is that practicing software is a political act. The second thing about software is that, well, we know that, here at least, software is eating the world. It's everywhere. It has a huge impact on our lives. We all use software, even without noticing it. And so, yes, software makes us fly, and sometimes crashes planes, and software makes us live longer and better lives, and sometimes kills us trying to do so. So we really have to understand and know that technology, and especially software, is a double-edged sword. And we really have to be careful when we use it and really think about the consequences of what we do. And another take on this is that given the personal, the communitarian, and the social and environmental consequences of technology and software, we really have a kind of a duty because the point is that not everyone understands what software is, what are the consequences of software, the risks, the limits. And well, it's okay because that's not their job and that's our job. And we do know that. We do know software, we do know the risks, the limits, and the consequences of software. We know the impact it has on, well, everything around us. And more than that, not only we know, but we can act because we are software practitioners. Because we build software, we deploy it, we spread the word, we support users, and so on. So we really can act on this. And we have kind of a power. And the point is that with great power comes great responsibility. So we kind of have a duty, a responsibility towards all the people who do not understand software, really, friends, family, strangers, and the nature, the planet Earth. And so this is something we have to think about, not only for us, but for everyone using software, whether they know it or not. So let's have a look at the personal ethics, because everything starts from the individual. The groups start from individuals, and that's really the beginning of our questioning about ethics and what we do and the consequences of what we do. Of course, ethics is an old discipline. Software is not that old, but we have had ethics in software since the beginning, 60 or 70 years ago now. And as soon as the beginning, there were people saying that this technology and this power should serve the people and should serve the society, and that people should kind of keep their hands on that. And we have had the hackers' ethics as soon as the beginning with people like Stephen Levy, Pika Imanem, or Eric Raymond. And well, basically what they say is that access to computers, information is free, computers can change the world for the better, mistrust authority and promote decentralization, things like that. There is also the free software movements that we all know since we're in an open source community, with the 4 essential freedoms of free software, which are I can use the software for every purpose I want, I can analyze it, I can modify it, and I can propagate the changes. So we all know that, but there is anecdotes when talking about ethics with people and open source people. Some of them sometimes say, I do a product, but I don't want the army to use it. I want to prevent military use. And the point is you just cannot do that, because free software means you're not preventing any kind of usage of the software you produce. So you really cannot prevent the software you produce to be used for killing people and harming people. That's the downside of it, but it's the way it is. And nowadays, in a more modern landscape, we have an awful lot of initiatives about giving back power to the people through technology, of course, and conferences, mailing lists, workshops on what are the implications of the technology on our societies, lives, communities, and so on the nature too. So there are the Fab Labs that really make people understand the software and give them the understanding and spread the word with really local people and so on. And as I said, you really have a lot of initiatives about ethical hacking, techno-shamanism, and techno-utopians. So there are a lot of different currents. We might think whatever we want about them, but they are really provoking the discussion, and they are really discussing what are the applications of technology on our lives and so on. So this is really important nowadays to see what they say and if it's really, well, if you agree with it or not, and see and push the reflection forward. I would say that everything starts from self-introspection. We are software practitioners, for many of us, for many years. Not saying we're old, but we have had kind of a career in that, and we must have met some difficult situations, questionable situations where we were young and we didn't care much about that, and we had a lot of pressure and not much time, so we had to do something that was not really cool when we think about it a few years after that. So this is something that we can do. Think about these situations and try to think what we would do now if that situation would happen again, and that will help us well know the limits of what we consider is okay and what we consider is not okay at all. That's really important, and from there we can start reading, thinking, discussing, and sharing that both as individuals, what do you think of that, and as an individual, and both as a community, when we are as a group, what should we do to prevent harassment and so on. And that's really an important point, because between what we know we would do, because we consider it's okay according to our own beliefs, and what we would really never do because that's really not okay. If you ask me to kill my neighbor, I'm not going to do it. Well, between these two zones, there is a gray zone, a gray area, where we are not yet ready to have a clear answer. And actually, that's where shits happen. Oh, sorry. That's where the devil lies. And what we can do, the only thing we can do actually, is to try to reduce this gray zone. Because if tomorrow or in 1 year a difficult situation arises, if it's in this gray zone, and well, usually that happens when you have not so much time and a lot of pressure and so on, so you might do the wrong choice. And preparing ourselves to face this kind of situation, well, in today or in 1 year, if I face this situation and I have kind of anticipated it, then I will be a bit more ready to make the right decision, so a decision that I do not regret afterwards. So that's really the main thing that we can do without knowing the future. That's the only probably thing that we can do, is trying to reduce this gray area of our consciousness. One good example of what we can do as software practitioners, I guess that most of us here are involved in a software project. So one of the first things we can do is try to make our projects ethical projects. There are a couple of easy steps that can be done. The first one is the licensing. It's quite an easy one, especially since we are an open source community. We know what that means. The second one is adopting a code of conduct. Not so many projects have a code of conduct. I think it's a kind of a problem, and it's something that can really be easily fixed. You have you have a couple of really good, ready-to-use templates for code of conduct. One of them is the Covenant Contributor code of conduct, so you can just reuse them really easily in your project, and you just have to say, if you want to contribute to this project, well, you agree to follow the code of conduct, and you are ready to be faced with replies if you misbehave or whatever. Just as a side note, every reference I give during the talk is on a website which serves as a reference for this talk, which is ethical.software, and you have all the links for the Covenant Contributor, the use cases, and so on. So I'll give the address later. Once you have adopted a code of conduct, it's good because you have told people that you want people to behave like that in this community, but you then need to enforce it. That's really important, because if it's only a file in your Git repositories, that's just not enough. So people must know that this exists, and must all agree that it's important for them, and that we should all enforce it. Another key point for having an ethical product, I guess, is the governance model. It should be transparent, public, and fair, of course. And that's really, well, you have your project and you happen to die, I'm sorry. And what happens with your project? Should the project die with you? Well, hopefully not. And so you should have something, a procedure that says, if I'm not here tomorrow, can people take control of the repository, the pull request, and so on? So that's part of the governance model. And so publish it, make people contribute to it, try to get their advice and opinion on that. That's one of the key points. And then, so once you have done that, a few years later, so we say that we have done that a few years ago, setting up a code of conduct and so on. The point is that quality and ethical concerns share a common thing. They should be renewed. They should be always up to date. And one good way to do that is to nurture and really nourish all the quality and quality-related and ethical-related initiatives in your community. So if someone is asking if diversity booth would be okay, or try to do something about diversity and so on, or try to assess the project quality, well, you should encourage them. That helps renew the interest in ethics and quality in your projects. That's quite important. Now, regarding the community. Well, regarding the community, there are a lot of code of ethics, code of conduct, and so on nowadays available for all community organizations and so on. So first, make a difference between the code of ethics, which is for business and decision making. This is mainly for big organizations and big companies. And the code of conduct, which is for actions and behavior. That one you can find in almost every, no, not in every project. That should be, but it's not the case. But all major forges have a code of conduct. Of course, all companies, or most companies have one, and many software projects have one too. Regarding the company and corporate code of conduct and code of ethics, all major big companies and organizations have one, or have several of them for the employee, for the user, for the supplier, and so on. They sometimes have both a code of conduct and code of ethics. But we have to admit that many times when a big company is involved in a scandal, in a public health issue, or illegal activities, or money laundering, and so on, well, they had a code of conduct, and they're still involved in the scandal. So that's not enough, but that's already a really good starting point, because if you have a code of conduct and, well, the days pass, and after 1 year or two you kind of forget it, and you start slightly misbehaving or not being rightly aligned with your code of conduct, then someone can come to you and say, you've written that down, and you've engaged yourself and our community to follow that. And so at that point you will say, you're right, we are going to fix this, and we are going to behave starting from now, and so on. So it's really a good start, a good foundation to start discussing, having actions about that, and people can refer to it in case of a breach or a slight variation. It's quite interesting to realize that many professions have a code of conduct or a code of professional practice, something like the Hippocrates Oath for doctors, and many other professions and corporations have such a code of practice. Interestingly enough, there is none for us, not a single one, not even one that is not followed. There is nothing for us. There are a couple of initiatives, but now they have been stopped, they are obsolete, and there is definitely nothing widely recognized for that. Regarding the big communities that we know in open source, well, of course, all major forges have a code of conduct, so the Apache Foundation, Eclipse Foundation, OpenStack, GitHub, well, the Linux Foundation, they all have a code of conduct, and they generally enforce it quite well. There is really a common concern about the understanding, interpretation, and application of the code of conduct within the community. So even if some people do respect the code of conduct but are, well, let's say on the edge, then there will be a discussion, and in most cases of breach, someone harassing someone else or someone misbehaving, well, in almost every cases when you are on the mailing list of the different forges, there are prompt reactions, people reacting and saying, you should not say that because we have a code of conduct and that's not the right way to behave. So that's really good. Another thing, really important thing is that, well, okay, you have set up a code of conduct, but there is a small guy who is really shy in one of the projects and he's the victim of harassment. You must have an easy way to report issues and to escalate them if needed. If the project lead does not understand that and doesn't want to hear about this guy must have ways to escalate above and make sure that whoever you are, you can get a way to have your issue raised and the harassment stop and so on. It should be noted also that when you have such a way to, such procedures to raise issues and so on, you also must prepare a way to prevent abuse of the code of conduct. Because if that little guy says, I do have great contributions, but they are not accepted, and I believe that's because I'm from this country, or I do have this religion, faith, color of skin, or whatever, then everybody will say, oh, yeah, you should integrate the contributions. Well, but if the contributions are really not good, it's not a matter of diversity or whatever, and this is the case, this is a case of abuse of the code of conduct. So, and we really must be prepared to both raise issues easily and prevent abuse of the code of conduct. In all these communities, there is a strong emphasis on respect, diversity, fairness, things like that, and meritocracy. This is something we're going to talk in one slide. What about ethics at the Eclipse Foundation? The Eclipse motto is transparency, openness, and meritocracy. Well, that's good. That's what we know in open source communities. We like them. That's a good start. Eclipse also has a very strong IP policy. So the code is 100% clean regarding the attribution and so on. And that's not only for lawyers. It's not something about big companies suing each other and so on. It's also about fairness. So this code comes from this guy, well, just keep the attribution to this guy. It's just only fair. Another really important point with the Eclipse Foundation is its governance model, especially in the case of the Eclipse Foundation, because there are strong links with the industry, with big companies, and we as a community, we do not want to be managed by these big companies. We really want to be independent, and the Eclipse Foundation makes a great job at that, about the independence and the transparent structure. All of these guys, from the board to the IT staff to the project leads and so on, they can all be reached quite easily. They are on the mailing list. You can talk to them. They usually answer. And when you go to them in conferences like that, well, they answer and they interact. So that's really cool. There are also a lot of initiatives from the members of the community, not directly driven by the structure itself. There are a lot of initiatives about diversity. There are demo camps, and as far as I know, there are demo camps especially for women, to help women get into the technology and the world of computers and so on. And they even have talks about ethics in their conferences. That's good. There is also a channel dedicated to diversity on Mattermost, on the Eclipse Mattermost instance. So it's something like mattermost.eclipse.org, and you can free join and go to this channel and contribute, say what you have to say and so on. It's quite active and many people interact on that. Let's say a word about meritocracy. This is something we all love in open source communities because, well, first, it's remarkably efficient. The Debian project, the Eclipse Foundation, Apache Foundation, and so on. So all this work with meritocracy, and we believe that's a fair model and so on. So it's undoubtedly efficient, but actually it's not that ethical. And there are two big things that, there are a lot of voices that rise this point. There are two big points. First of all, actually, studies show that meritocracy leads to greater inequality. There is kind of a bias that says, if I'm a woman and there is a woman who wants to contribute some code or rise, get a position or whatever, and she's really good, but I'm a woman and I don't want to be accused of favorizing a woman, so I'm not going to vote for her. So that's kind of a human bias. We all do that in some way or the other, and it's kind of unconscious. But as a matter of fact, it leads to greater inequality. And so that's the work of Emilio Castilla. Once again, it's all on the ethical.software website. And there are a couple of really interesting articles based on surveys in big companies, associations, organizations, and so on. And the second point about meritocracy is that some people have a bad behavior and are excused based on their technological contributions. And there are a couple of big examples of people who are really good technically and are just not nice sometimes. And they are excused because they are well known and they know their stuff and they are the center of the community and so on. Well, actually, it's not because you're a great guy technically that you can harass people or misbehave or talk nasty and so on. So this does not mean that meritocracy is not a good system. This means that we just have to be careful of its limits. Okay, let's have a few use cases to exercise our judgment, because that's really not always as simple as it seems to be on the right side. One of the cases, or of the use cases, is about whistleblowers. So whistleblowers are people who decide to do a public disclosure of some information because there is some illegal activity or there is a major health problem or money laundering or things like that. And so, of course, it's private information. And when they decide to make that public disclosure, well, they will lose their job, of course. They will probably have, they will probably be sued and they will probably never find a job again. So things are getting better now, but 5–10 years ago, it was really a nightmare for them. And they did it for us. And so it requires a lot of courage and preparation. Once again, preparation is the key. So loyalty is one thing and consciousness is another one. But the point is that these guys have probably done more against corruption and for the public health than any other people in the world during the last 10 years, with the Panama Papers, all the WikiLeaks stuff, the Snowden, Monsanto paper recently. I mean, these guys have done more for the people and for the greater good than most organizations and so on. So that's something that's really efficient. And as a side note, now some job interviews have questions that put the candidates in a situation where there is some information that should not be disclosed, and they ask them subtly what they would do. And actually the employers expect the candidate to really do the whistleblowing to succeed, to pass the test. So that's really something that is really interesting and that is happening. I've heard that from job interviews in the UK last year. So that's really interesting. Another case is about killer robots. Killer robots are self-triggering weapons. So that means weapons that decide by themselves if they should shoot that guy running here, and so decide if he's a friend or an enemy, and decide if the guy should be killed. That's Skynet. That's really Skynet. And the point is that if you believe that killer robots belong only to movies and fiction and things like that, well, think again, because they already exist. There are a lot of them in South Korea, and there are a lot of them all around the world. There are two major companies doing these robots, Dodan and Samsung, all are both Korean, by the way. And one interesting thing is that there is an interview, a public interview you can find on YouTube from one engineer of the Dodam company. And he says, so we have this robot, and we have a module that can self-trigger the killings, but actually the customers do not want it. So they buy the robots, but they do not want the self-triggering module because they want to keep a hand on the trigger. So that's quite interesting because the manufacturer provides that, proposes that, and the customers say no. So, thanks. Until now, at least. Talking about regulation in the Geneva Convention, the anti-personnel mines are kind of a self-triggering weapon, and they are forbidden by the Geneva Convention. The killer robots are not forbidden by the Geneva Convention. And for your information, there is a lot of reflections and thinking ongoing in the European Union about whether we should allow and authorize killer robots in Europe. So that's both at the European Union level and at the states level. There have been some really interesting exchanges in the Netherlands about that, and the conclusion was not good because they believe that since there was a programmer who did the algorithm to decide if the robot should kill that person or not, it's enough a human in the loop to authorize it. So the simple fact that a programmer have written the code is considered human in the loop, so it should be authorized. So that's not yet the case at the European Union level, but we should be careful about that. Last use case, the Dieselgate. Dieselgate is a successful attempt at faking completely the environmental regulations in Europe. And that's very great because everybody knew about it. The manufacturers, the car manufacturers knew it. They wrote the cheating code. The states knew it. The auditors of the state knew it. And the European Union knew it. And the auditors of the European Union knew it. So the only people who didn't know it were us. And the thing is, at least in France, there was a review, a commission, an official commission, and so on. And the French Minister of the Environment, French Minister of the Environment, said we cannot impede our national industry with that. So the economical side has won over the public health side. That's great. And meanwhile, between 3 and 9 million people die every year from outdoor air pollution. So there are different sources. The one I've found here, the 3 million people, you can click or go to the ethical software website. There are other references. And an interesting point is that even whistleblowers were not heard. We have had articles in the press in France 5, 6 years ago, and nothing happened. So there was kind of a omerta on that. So sometimes whistleblowing is just not enough. Okay, so what I would like to stress in this talk is that ethics really start from ourselves and extend to the world. So what we do, what we think, so the thinking we have about it, the actions we have about it, the behavior we have about it, makes us, makes our community, and makes the world of computer. So that's really important that we start this work and we spread it and propagate it and talk between us and with others about that. The second point is that we really need to prepare ourselves, because if we do not prepare ourselves, sooner or later we will arrive in a situation where someone asks us to make a quick decision with a big interest, a lot of money and so on. And if we are not prepared for this situation, we will probably make the wrong choice. So preparing ourselves and trying to anticipate that, asking ourselves if we think it's okay or not, is really the thing to do if we want to prepare ourselves for that. Third point, we really need to raise awareness about that. There are just not enough ethical discussion in the computer science world and in conferences and so on. It should be noted that last year we had one. This year we have at least 2, so it's a good trend. but we really need to spread the word, discuss that, and make that happen in our own communities. So around us, starting from us and around us. That's mandatory. And if there should be one word to summarize that, it would be something like, we do care. So what's next? Asking the question here. Should we write a manifesto like the Hippocrates wrote for the doctors? Should we have kind of a code of conduct attached to our profession? Should we assess projects' ethical dimension? Nowadays we assess projects' quality, maturity, things like that. Should we add to these quality models another quality attributes about ethics, about governance, and so on? And if so, should we have a suitable ethical label like the sustainable trade on the goods we buy? These are open questions, and so next is you. What will you do? What will we do? Thank you. To finish, so this is the website, ethical.software. There are other references here. If you want to contribute, you're welcome. It's a Git repo. You can fork it, pull requests, and so on. These slides are here. You can reuse them for whatever purpose, for material or whatever. And one last thing, please vote for this talk. Say if you really liked it or really loved it. And thank you. $10.